Good evening from the News Radio, 1120 AM and 93.7 FM, KPNW studios. And today, wearing my Sunday go-to-meeting flannels, I'm Bill London. I co-host the Wake Up Call, 6 a.m. to 9, Monday through Fridays. You can stream us if you want to hear it at kpnw.com. And I'm sure that probably you folks living in Montana are like, ooh, I'm all over that. All right. News brought to you, by the way, by Dr. Michael Bratland of Chris Dental, where if you call him today, you can see him today. All right. Well, did you hear that there was this thing on Tuesday? You may have heard about it. You know, it was really under the radar. It was this thing where people went and voted. All right. So in Oregon, really the only race that makes Oregon even noticeable in this last election period had to do with a single congressional district. Now, for the most part, all of our Oregon congressional leaders are Democrats, with the exception of two. One is Cliff Pence, who is a representative in an area that covers mostly everything east of the Cascades, to an extent, and is very rural and very conservative. Then you have Congressional District number 5. Now, this was gerrymandered by Oregon Democratic leaders and goes literally from Clackamas County, which is right near Portland, across the Cascades, juts up into the gorge and down over into Bend in central Oregon. There is nothing about this district that wasn't gerrymandered. And what really shocked the Democrats was in 2022, because they'd figured that it was going to be safely Democratic, the seat was actually won by a Republican, Lori Chavez DeRaymer. Well, now, all of a sudden, that seat is something that is being watched nationally because it could actually help determine who gets control of the U.S. House. So right now, Lori Chavez DeRaymer is trailing her challenger, Democrat Janelle Bynum, a far left-wing opponent. And at this point, we're about 2 percentage points that are splitting them, with the incumbent behind by 2 percentage points. Both candidates say that they're not surprised by the vote, and both of them are not saying anything else until all of the ballots are counted. Well, that's going to be about another week in Oregon because of the way the ballots are counted here with mail-in balloting. So who will win, who will lose, we don't know. In every other case in the state, the incumbents kept their seats. So everybody was expecting that we were going to have riots in Portland. Portland Police Bureau pulled everyone off of their vacations. Everyone's working 12-hour shifts. And lo and behold, Tuesday night, nothing happened. Lo and behold, Wednesday, nothing happened. And yet they wait, and the governor sends out a preemptive warning now, even though nothing has happened. And she is calling for peaceful demonstrations, saying if people want to express their opinion about the outcome, she says she'll have zero tolerance for actions that threaten and terrorize others. And we should note, there have been almost no demonstrations of any kind in Portland since the election. Now, Oregon had a bunch of really bad ideas that were on this particular ballot and for ballot measures. There was one of them that's pretty solid, because Oregon is the only state that doesn't have some sort of mechanism to impeach a statewide elected official like our former Secretary of State, who was receiving $9,000 a month from a pot chain and its owners to work for them as a consultant while she was Secretary of State. That would be Shinmia Fagan. She was finally run out of office, just, I think, out of shame. Anyway, so ballot measure 115 would amend the Constitution and allow for statewide elected officials to be impeached. It is passing by a wide margin. Then you had this idea that on the outset sounds good and gives you an idea of the problem with the way ballot titles are written in Oregon. Ballot titles are written by the Attorney General. And the Attorney General, in this state at least, is very partisan. So Measure 116, if you read it, it says, establishes independent Public Service Compensation Commission to determine salaries for specified officials, eliminates legislative authority to set salaries. Which sounds like all sorts of good, right? That you can't have legislators actually, setting their own salaries, even though it's actually a good idea because you can hold them accountable for it. Well, this so-called Independent Public Service Compensation Commission is actually stacked with lackeys that Oregon's legislative leaders choose, and then those people they choose will set their salaries. So in other words, we didn't set our salaries. We didn't do that. And even though you can't be a state worker or related to a politician, everything else goes. And since the legislature is stacking this independent public commission, it's going to be political lackeys because legislators in Oregon have been complaining for years, we don't get paid enough. Yeah. Oh, we're sad. Anyway, that is fairly tight, but failing by about 7 percentage points. Then, ranked choice voting. It is failing 60 to 40%. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. I think I mentioned, maybe it was with Rick last week, that there is a ballot measure in Alaska to repeal their ranked choice voting. And we'll get to that in a second. Measure 18, of course, was going to be a 3% tax on any company, corporation, or other that makes over $25 million a year. And by the way, there's no write-offs. And this is before profits. This is on total economic activity. Right off the top, 3%. And it is failing by a huge margin. Then, because that all would have been passed on to the consumers. Measure 119, that sets up a mechanism where pot employees, so if you work for a pot chain, you can basically set up a union. That is actually passing 55 to 44%. Now, that's today's numbers. These are going to change because of the way that Oregon counts ballots. And a lot of people were known to have put their ballots in the mail literally on Election Day. So we really won't have a full count of the ballots until sometime, late next week. So we were talking about ranked choice voting. So here's an example. Now, Portland, as a city, adopted ranked choice voting. And in Portland, voters, it appears pretty much a done deal, have elected Keith Wilson. Now, he's a trucking company CEO, a complete political outsider, and it looks like he's going to become the city's 54th mayor. Now, as of the latest count, Wilson is leading Portland Commissioner Carmen Rubio 62 to 38%. Now, that's a margin of more than 42,000 votes. So after 19 preliminary rounds of vote counting, even though not all the ballots are even in yet, and candidate elimination under the city's first election using ranked choice voting, it looks like, given the rough estimate, that there could be about 100,000 ballots that have yet to be tallied. It doesn't look like that there is a path for Rubio, at least it's not thought, to overcome Wilson and his lead. So here's how ranked choice voting works, and there's going to be a quiz after this for you, Rick. So, with more than 180,000 votes tallied for mayor, Wilson was the first choice. Again, this is ranked choice. Wilson was the first choice of 35% of voters, compared to 21% who ranked Rubio first. And he was heavily preferred over Rubio as a next choice by voters who favored Portland Commissioner Rene Gonzalez, the third-place finisher. Now, Gonzalez trailed behind the pair, capturing a high of 25% in early vote counting rounds before failing to advance. And that's because Portland Commissioner Mingus Mapps captured a high of 15% before being eliminated. Follow that? That's how ranked choice voting works. Now, for the last couple of years, Alaskans have been dealing with ranked choice voting, and I've been following this. So, at this point, more Alaskans are voting to do away with ranked choice voting than actually voted against the measure originally. About 70% of the votes through right now. And it looks like ballot measure 2 in one form or another may go down to defeat, but it's too close to call because they've got 100,000 ballots left to count. Ballot measure number 2 would repeal in Alaska the voting system that's been in place. And if the measure passes, political parties would go back to doing voting like we normally do it. But there were a number of opponents against ballot measure number 2. As a matter of fact, the proponents of ranked choice voting, who were now set against ballot measure 2 in Alaska, raised nearly $14 million to try and get ballot measure 2 to fail. The yes on 2 raised only $150,000. And all of the money, or almost all of it, is coming in from out-of-state groups into Alaska. As a matter of fact, millions of out-of-state dollars in Alaska were spent trying to essentially litigate the proponents behind ballot measure 2 into oblivion to keep them from getting it on the ballot. So we're going to keep an eye on that. Now, as you would expect, with President or former President Donald Trump now being President-elect Donald Trump again, some heads have been exploding. And Rick, I'm not sure if you talked about this, but I'm going to get into it. So, one of our local school districts in Eugene, Oregon, the 4J school district, has an administrator, Colt Gill, who is an interim administrator. And the way that it's typically worked with 4J, you become the interim administrator or superintendent, and then you become the permanent. So, on Wednesday morning, this showed up in 4J employees' emails. He says, "Hello, everyone. Today, with little rest or time for reflection, we return to our schools, coworkers, and students after a divisive national election season. With the re-election of President Trump, emotions will be at the surface across our community. The 2024 election has stirred strong feelings. As many in the country celebrate, so will many supporters here in Eugene. Well, we also have many in our schools and community who are feeling concern, trepidation, fear, and anger over the results. Please take the time to breathe today. Care for yourselves and strive to provide greater additional grace to one another." Now, I'm going to skip some parts of this because it just gets into tripe, but I want to get to a few points. He further says, "It may be hard for some staff to be at work today, but this is a moment when some students will come to school with more uncertainty, more fear than yesterday. Thank you for stepping forward for our students." Now, here's the good part. "The tension and anxiety many will carry today is not unfounded. The president-elect has stated that he will deport legal and illegal immigrants. He has stated he will eliminate the U.S. Department of Education. He spoke out against marginalized, belittled, and or intimidated immigrants, people of color, people with disabilities, people with LGBTQ2SIA plus identities, women, the media, Democratic Party members, people of the Muslim faith, and other people he disagrees with. When someone with such enormous power and responsibility willingly targets whole classes of people in this way, the weight, fright, and dread some will carry today and into the future is founded and requires no explanation. That's a little partisan. And interestingly, when did Trump ever say he was going to deport legal immigrants? I don't remember anything about that. And talking about people of color, did he not maybe get the memo that it was actually Trump received more black votes than pretty much any Republican candidate has in history, and that he received more Latino votes than any U.S. president in the last 50 years? Then he goes on to say, we must strive to overcome implicit bias in ourselves and the institutional racism and bias that is embedded in our system and structure to fully include each and every student. Now, this is a long letter. It goes on. Those are the main things. Then he says, thank you, Colt Gill, he, him, interim superintendent. Now, among other things, this is pretty partisan. I think we could agree that it's pretty partisan. I would like to know if there was a second letter, because this took a little time to put together. I don't think that Colt Gill just sat down at his word processor when he got up on Wednesday morning, stretched, sipped his coffee, and said, yeah, I better fire off a memo to the staff. This had obviously taken a little bit of time for him to put together. I wonder what the other letter might have been had Kamala Harris won, talking about the fear and trepidation that members of the community might be feeling and how we should embrace those people and show them grace and empathy. You're right. Now, here's the other thing. So that came out on Wednesday morning. Back in mid-October, this is a letter that was sent to school district employees, and it was from Carmen Zamara. She is the chief of staff of the Eugene School District 4J. And this is called a gentle reminder. She says, as we move into fall, the energy of the upcoming presidential election is palpable. The season is an exciting time of civic engagement and reminds us the role we play as public servants. With the presidential election just around the corner in November, it's important that we navigate this time thoughtfully and with care. While we all hold personal political beliefs in our roles as public employees, we have a responsibility to ensure we remain neutral during work hours and when using district resources. It goes on further to say, under law, as public employees, we cannot, and it's can't, big letters right there, all caps, we can't advocate for or against a measure or candidate while on work time, speaking as a public employee, or using public resources. This includes the use of staff time, district-owned property such as copiers, technology devices, the computer network, or any other district resource. She says, I've included for review a political activity guidelines for public employees in schools. It's a good idea to review these prior to an election. Again, Colt Gill's letter. Public employees cannot use public time or resources to advocate for or against a ballot measure or candidate. Here's a review of the state laws and guidelines that public employees and public agencies, including schools, must follow in distributing information about ballot measures or candidates. So that would kind of be the president. These rules apply whenever there is an election. Public agencies, including schools, cannot use public time or resources to advocate for or against a ballot measure or candidate, again, including the use of our communications network, our computer network, or our school communications channels to send information. It even states the Oregon public statute that says you can't do this. And I will read the law where it says, no public employee shall solicit any money, influence, service, or other thing of value, or otherwise promote or oppose any political committee, or promote or oppose the nomination or election of a candidate, gathering petitions, doing any of these, goes through a list of things you can't do during work hours, but it doesn't restrict your right to express your political views on your private time. This is a violation of that. This is obviously political. It's obviously biased. There is obviously no other letter in the queue saying, oh, Kamala Harris is one. We're so sorry for you folks that feel like you're threatened because of her win. That's one. Then, at the University of Oregon, which is just down the street, a Greek life administrator working for the University of Oregon finally was put on leave after posting an offensive reaction to the results of the presidential election. Leonard Serrato, the Ducks Fraternity and Sorority Life Assistant Director, posted an expletive-filled rant mocking supporters of President-elect Donald Trump on his public Instagram page. He said, if you're so effing sad about your groceries being expensive, get a better paying job. Do better in life. Get an education. Do something because you're blanking stupid. He's belted in the car seat in this video. He ends the video by flashing a peace sign and suggesting Trump supporters go jump off a bridge, F you. Well, that video has since come off his social media page. It's private. The fun thing is that video has been reposted and is making the rounds just about everywhere, including, I think, the libs of TikTok. So it got some attention among those, President Donald Trump's son, Donald Jr. Now, in a statement Thursday, U of O officials called Serrato's comments abhorrent and not in alignment with our values or mission, saying that the assistant director has now been placed on administrative leave while the university investigates. But that comment came out after this video went completely viral. By the way, congratulations on the school newspaper over at the U of O, Daily Emerald, breaking this. Now, when they found this video, they asked the university what they thought. And before the video went viral, a different spokesperson told the newspaper that Serrato's comments have been made on his own time, which is well within his rights. So it's okay. Just a couple of examples of Oregonians' heads exploding because, well, evil orange man got reelected. All right, time for you to get real, Rick. I'm out.